We could start. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for coming. I'll let Josh, you can keep letting people into the waiting room as they pop in, but we don't want to be respectful of everyone's time. So my name is Julie Roth, and I work with I see waves. That's so nice. You see people and waving. I work with the Office of Sustainability and Innovations at the City of Ann Arbor, and I am the Solarize program coordinator. So I'm coordinating the kind of a solar bulk buy program that we have running. I'm also working with the city's office on some of the electrification initiatives, residential, and educational outreach, and kind of intersecting with some of the other programs that we're running. Also here is Joshua McDonald, who is up with the radio announcer setup. He's our the energy manager at the City of Ann Arbor, and he is energy something coordinator. What are you, Josh?
Yes, I'm the coordinator.
Energy coordinator at the city, and he's also here to help answer questions and help out with technical support and general support. So thank you everybody for coming. We've had a ton of interest in this. Just for the record, it's being recorded because there were a lot of people who signed up who couldn't attend and wanted to view it later. So just keep in mind that you're being recorded. It's not going to go to CNN or anything, but it will probably be circulated into the general public in Ann Arbor. So you might want to behave however you would if you knew you were being watched. So what I'm going to do today is so you may have noticed that there's no chat function on this Zoom call. And the reason for that is because this particular Zoom account is a city account that is also used sometimes for public meetings. And those public meetings are required to have a Open Meetings Act, right? And so they're not allowed to have chat function. So chat function's been disabled. So I'm sorry about that. But what we will do is I will present a whole bunch of information, and then we'll come back into this space and we will take questions. And we'll go over how to raise your hand for those people who don't know how to use the technology to raise your hand when we get to that point, in case we have more people trickle in, so I don't have to repeat it twice. But in the meantime, if you have a little notepad, remember notepads with pencils, or your notes on your phone, or however you want to do it, and you think of a question, you might want to just jot it down or keep it in mind. The presentation might answer your question by the time we get to the end of it, but if it doesn't, we'll have lots of time for questions and answers. All right. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. I need to go to slideshow. Here we go. All right, everybody can see that? Thumbs up.
I see you.
Yep. Okay. Excellent. Great. You can see the slides. So now I can see the slides. Okay. So this is what we're going to be talking about today: renewable energy, electrification, and efficiency. And I've already introduced myself, and that's who I am. And it is February in 2021. And if this is not where you thought you were coming, feel free to find the Zoom that you thought you were going to, but otherwise you are welcome to stay and learn. So hopefully many of you, most of you, have heard about A20. In late 2019, the Ann Arbor City Council declared a climate emergency unanimously, and they directed the Office of Sustainability and Innovations to create a plan to get to carbon neutrality community-wide by 2030. This is not municipal carbon neutrality. It's not just talking about the city buildings and the city fleets and things like that. It's talking about the community by 2030. This is a big goal, audacious goal, aggressive goal, necessary goal, given the scope of what needs to happen to adequately address climate change. So then the city, the Office of Sustainability, underwent a massive 5-month planning process with huge amounts of outreach and stakeholder engagement. They convened technical advisory committees and public surveys and town halls and researched best practices and put together a 2.0. And this is the carbon neutrality plan, the path to carbon neutrality by 2030 that was put together by the office and all of the community and the community's input and the stakeholder input. We initially thought that this would be a smorgasbord of ideas we could choose from to get there. And it turns out that we had to eat the whole buffet. There was no choices. Mostly we had to do everything. So this is a snapshot here of our carbon emissions as a city from 2000. And you can see that the city has made progress on our emissions. We've been working on it. There's been a climate action plan, and Josh has been with the city for quite some time working on these things, and we have made progress over time. Even as we've grown in population, we have managed to reduce our carbon, our emissions, but not fast enough. As you can see, in order to get to zero by 2030, that curve has to drop, and it has to drop much more quickly. On the left side of your screen, you'll see a little emissions snapshot. This is from a couple years ago, but it still holds true for the most part. And this is sort of where our carbon emissions are coming from in the city. And you'll see that about 1/3 of our emissions are from the University of Michigan as an institution. We know many of you may be aware that the President's PCCC and President's Commission on Carbon Neutrality, I think it's an advisory commission that has been meeting for a very long time and working very hard to come up with some draft recommendations for how the university will move. And that was just released and is good and is aggressive. And we're really excited about their movement in this space. The rest of it, 75%, 2/3 of it, is us, is not University of Michigan. And of that, residential sector accounts for about, well, not of that, of the whole pie, the residential sector in Ann Arbor accounts for approximately 1/4. And that's what we're talking about here. We know that buildings, the residential buildings, not commercial buildings or industrial buildings, but residential buildings in Ann Arbor are responsible for approximately 20% of our emissions. We can't get to carbon neutrality without addressing that. So that's what we're going to talk about. So the big picture of the A20 plan has 7 overarching strategies. What we're talking about today is going to address the first 3, which are powering our electric grid with 100% renewable energy, right? We have to stop burning coal and burning gas and fossil fuels and in the grid and to power our electricity. Number 2 then is switching our appliances and our vehicles from fossil fuels to clean electricity. So as we clean up our electrical grid, we are switching from burning fuel in our buildings and in cars to that clean electricity. Number 3 is improving energy efficiency, because as we'll talk about, increasing everything, all of our appliances and cars to electricity will put a whole lot of strain on our grid, which is already, it's not like there's a whole lot of capacity floating around out there. So we need to reduce the amount of energy that we're using. That's the cleanest energy. This is stuff that we never use. If you haven't discovered already, none of this is easy and none of this is small. This is big. This is big stuff. This is hard, but we're doing it anyway because we don't know anything else to do other than do it and succeed. 4, 5, and 6. 4 is reduce the miles we travel in our vehicles by 50%. Number 5 is change the way we use, reuse, and dispose of materials in the city. And number 6 is enhance the resilience of our people and our place, because we know that climate change is already here. We're already experiencing it, and the experience of it is going to get worse even if we meet all of our goals. And then 7, of course, is the overarching other, which encompasses a whole lot of other things. But what we're talking about today is the first 3. Why? This is why. Because we don't as far as I'm concerned, we don't really have a choice. We either go big or go home, so to speak. And going big seems like a better option for me. I know personally, my personal story is that, it feels very much as though I've been concerned about this for a very, very long time, as I'm sure most of you have, and have been waiting a very, very long time for somebody to do something about it, right? Federal government, the world, the UN, the state, the scientists, the politicians, everybody knows about this and somebody's going to do something. And as it turns out, nobody was doing what needed to be done. And now it's all of us. So now all of it has to happen at the same time. And we're kind of past the point where we can kind of slowly and sequentially address this in a really methodical way. That would have been even 20 years ago. And now we just have to do all the things all at once from a federal government standpoint, from state policy, from individual choices, as a community, as a city, as a region, and as a world. And if we all do all of the things, then we have the best chance at creating a future for our kids and our grandkids. So that is why I'm here talking to you. And that's why I'm so passionate about this work. I'm going to start on a dark note and then it gets much better, I promise. Okay, so don't leave yet. But I don't know if you've seen this yet. This came out on the 9th. What's today, the 11th? So 2 days ago. This was a study that was just published from Harvard University. And it's just really fascinating for those of you who are a little wonky and like modeling and that kind of thing. You should take a look at it. It's in the journal called Environmental Research. And what they found was that air pollution from burning fossil fuels kills approximately 8.7 million people a year globally. That's about a little less than 1 in 5 global premature deaths, which is double previous estimates. They changed the way that they were looking at this and the way they were modeling it into a much more, looking much more regionally at air pollution and deaths. And it's alarming and astounding. This has been getting an awful lot of press over the last couple of days, as it should. And this is aside from climate change. This is just air pollution, outdoor air quality from burning fossil fuels. So to parse it out a little bit, in the US, we're talking about approximately 350,000 deaths per year in people over age 14. And this is in addition to deaths from smoke due to wildfires. And just to put it in perspective, there are approximately 39,000 deaths from gun violence per year. And we know that that is a major epidemic in this country. So if you look at the little map that we've got there, you can see basically that's particulate matter from fossil fuel combustion in different areas of our world. And you can also see where we are doesn't look great. We're not in the bright red, but we are not in the blue either. We are not looking good, even within our country right here. We're not looking good. And the top 10 states in our country with the highest deaths per capita include basically this area, right? The Midwest. Michigan's right in there. And the study also found that the burning of fossil fuels, the air pollution that it created was linked to every major cause of death, from heart disease to COVID-19. So, and this is not what I'm usually thinking about when I'm thinking about burning fossil fuels. I'm usually thinking about the more indirect effects on our health and our well-being, like, rising water levels and crop failures and wildfires and things like that. But this is real and it's true and it's stunning. So we know we have a problem, but I promised you it will get better, this lecture. And because there is a solution, we know the solution. It's just a matter of doing what we know we have to do. So the problem that we're addressing now today is that the residential buildings account for 20% of our community-wide greenhouse gas emissions, and we have to change that. And there's a solution to this that is like a trifecta. It is renewable energy, electrification, and efficiency. So we're going to go over those things. We're going to start with renewable energy. We know that our electrical grid looks like this in the most simple form. There's a power station somewhere and it generates energy somehow. Usually here in Michigan, it's coal, burning natural gas. It could also be some degree of renewables. There can be wind and solar power. There can be nuclear, right? And that power station is generating energy. That energy is flowing through transformers and wires and coming down into your home. And when you turn on your lights, you are pulling from that power station, however that energy is generated, whether it's clean or dirty. And unfortunately here, especially in Michigan, it's quite dirty. We know that DTE's grid future is uncertain. They're still wrangling around with it and figuring out how to clean it and how quickly to clean it. Right now, it is heavily based in coal still. We are still using electricity in Michigan that is primarily burning coal. Yeah. And even in their most ambitious version of where they intend to go, which is still very unclear, it's not aggressive enough, according to the science, to get where we need to go. And so the grid needs to be cleaned up faster than what we're doing. So there are three things I want to talk about today briefly in regards to how do we power our buildings with renewable energy. One is we clean up the grid. We shut down the power plant or the coal plant and we get a whole bunch of renewables and we get renewables on the grid. This is slow, this is difficult, and it's necessary, right? All of those things are true. And so there are people working now on how are we going to power our city? How do we procure a clean grid? And what do we do immediately to get new renewables on the grid? What do we do over time to shut down all of the dirty power plants? And that's a path that's being worked on. Number two, we could do community solar. And some of you may have heard of community solar. Community solar is where, let's say Ann Arbor owns a park or a landfill, or you have a condo complex with a big piece of land outside and you put up a whole bunch of solar and you power everybody around that area with your little community solar. Unfortunately, the state of Michigan does not allow this right now. There is not a lot of solar friendly legislation in our state. We're not progressive. We're not at the front end of that. There are also people working very hard to change this. There are some examples of community solar in Michigan, but right now it needs to be a collaborative exercise with the utility. And so it depends on your utility, whether they want to collaborate and create community solar with you, but you can't do it on your own. There are many, many, many utilities in Michigan. I can't remember how many, maybe Josh remembers, but we are all in DTE's service area, and DTE currently is not doing community solar. So we need to do that because we have lots of land and because we can put solar all over the place and really help the grid by distributing the power generation, but we don't have legislation right now. So that's another thing that has to happen, but other people are working on it. In the meantime, what we can do is the third thing, which is on-site renewables. Okay, that's rooftop solar, ground mount solar. And this is accessible now. And it is accessible not by everybody, right? If you don't own your own roof, if you're a renter, you can't access this. If you're very low income, you don't have credit or capital, you can't access this. But a lot of people can access this. And the programs that we're initiating at the city and the federal government are really trying hard to lower the point of access so that more and more people can do this, so that we can get more solar onto our grid while we're trying to do the other things that we're trying to do as well, community solar and cleaning up the grid. So the big picture, right, that we talked about in the A20 plan, powering our electric grid with 100% renewable energy, our goal within Ann Arbor is to put solar everywhere that we can find, right? Private homes, commercial buildings, industrial buildings, everywhere that we can put solar, that can host solar, we'll put solar. And although one person's solar may not make a huge wave of difference, as a community, we can make a huge difference. And then anything that we can't produce here in our footprint, we're working on procuring new renewable energy for our grid. And that's the goal, right? And that's sort of what we're doing. To that end, we have created a program called Solarize Ann Arbor. And this is a program that I run, and it is a program where we bring friends and neighbors and community members together and we've pre-negotiated some group buy discounts with a whole bunch of regional and local solar installers that work with the program. So we bring together a whole bunch of neighbors, and we bring together the installer that one person that the host of the meeting has chosen. So the city acts as a facilitator, and we do a Zoom meeting like this one, and we talk all about solar, and then we have people who are interested get estimates for their own homes, and depending on the numbers of people that move forward, getting up to sometimes 15% discount on their system from the participating installer, because the installer is saving a lot of money on soft costs by having one meeting with a whole bunch of interested people instead of driving to Traverse City and driving to Detroit and driving to Milan and driving to Chelsea for one interested customer at a time. Solar costs, if you looked at solar, rooftop solar, distributed solar 10 years ago, and you relook at it today, you will be pleasantly surprised at the cost drop. I have installers telling me, like, even 15 years ago, it was early adopters and people who were doing this for environmental reasons, but there was not a financial reason to go solar. It was just a cost, really. It was so expensive that it wouldn't really pay itself off over time. And this has changed. Solar costs, you can see they've gone down, probably halved in the last 10 years. And in the meantime, the efficiency of solar panels, the technology has improved significantly. So now, at the same time that the costs have come down, your solar panels are much more efficient at turning sunlight into electricity. So your system size doesn't need to be as big. So your cost is really coming down, and it's getting to this very, very sweet spot where it's becoming affordable for a lot more people to do. At the same time that all of that is true, the electricity costs have not been going in that direction. As any of you know who are watching your electricity bills, they're just going up. And this is a graph of electricity costs in the Midwest. These are all the Midwestern states in our region. And that green line at the top, that's Michigan. So we have the highest electricity rates in the entire region. And they continue to go up. So in May of 2019, the MPSC, which is the Michigan Public Service Commission, approved an almost 9% increase in residential prices. 2 months later, DD came back, requested more, and they got another 4.7% increase. And I think, I'm not really keeping track of it, but I think they're back to wanting to increase it again. So our electricity costs continue to rise and rise and rise. Whereas if you finance your solar and you're paying it off per month, that's going to be a fixed cost. It's not going to keep going up every month. So there are a lot of financial incentives to going solar now as well. The federal tax credit that was supposed to be sunsetting and then expiring after this year just got extended. Somehow last December, when they passed that big spending bill that everybody actually passed and Trump actually signed, in there somehow was an extension of the federal tax credit for solar. And so it's been extended. This year was supposed to come down to 22%, and then it was going to be gone. Instead, they extended it. So what this means is that there is an income tax credit when you put solar on that is 26%. That means that when you do your taxes at the end of the year, you can literally take 26% off the cost of whatever you spent on your solar system, and you get it back in an income tax credit. If your income tax liability is not big enough to take advantage of that credit, you can actually roll it over into the following year or several years, I believe. Also, you may have heard in the recent past that when you would get solar on your roof, your home would be reassessed and your property taxes would go up, which was a massive disincentive to putting solar on your roof because it really took away much of the financial benefit. Well, this also got changed. So when Gretchen Whitmer took office, the legislature, in a bipartisan manner, was very positive about rolling back this property tax assessment and sent it to Gretchen Whitmer, and she signed it, and that is no longer happening. So there, that's over. You may hear that your property taxes will increase, but that is not true anymore. And this helps to offset some of the changes that DTE has made in reimbursement, and we'll talk about that. And then there's the Solarize bulk buy discounts that we're running here, and they can be anywhere from 5 to 15% off, depending on the vendor, the installer, and the number of people who are participating in the group. So briefly, how rooftop solar works, okay, is the solar panels produce, they bake in the sun, and they use that sun energy to produce direct current. They convert it to DC energy. This DC energy flows into something called an inverter, which is a box that lives in your garage or somewhere. And that inverter has to change it into alternating current, or AC power, because that is the kind of power that your house uses. When you plug in something, it's AC, alternating current. So you get DC from the panel, goes into the inverter, changes it to AC current, flows into your home, powers all your stuff, right? If you are on a bright sunny June day, let's say, and the sun is just baking your solar panels and producing like crazy amounts of energy, and you're not using very much energy because it's the middle of the day, your lights aren't on, and you don't need your AC because it's June, then you're going to be producing more energy than you're using. And so what will happen is that energy flows back out into the grid, because energy just flows. It doesn't really know where to go. It just goes wherever is the closest place. So it powers your whole house, and then anything left over flows out into the grid and goes to your neighbor, which I love so much about solar when I think about powering my neighbors as well. And then essentially what happens is at nighttime, when your panels are not producing anything because there is no sun, but you want your lights to come on, well, then you're pulling from the grid, because this is what's called a grid tied system. And DTE credits you for your overproduction when you're producing more, and then gives you credit for when you take back from the grid. DTE used to credit you full price, full retail rate for the excess generation. That was called net metering. And that sunsetted. They got rid of that and successfully lobbied their point, I guess, and reduced how much they're reimbursing you for your excess to about half of what it was. So now you're pulling from the grid at full retail rate and you're selling back at half. So essentially what this has done has increased the amount of time it takes to pay off your solar system by a few years. And not ideal, but that's where we are. And the truth is that these things keep changing over time. And there's legislation and people pushing back, and it may change again. Now, having said all of that, there's also the option of adding a battery. So if you have a battery in your home, then instead of sending your excess energy back into the grid, your excess energy can get stored in your battery, and you can use that when at nighttime or in the dark winter when you're not producing enough. The other thing that's important to know about a battery is that if you don't have a battery and the grid goes out because of a storm and you lose power, you're going to lose power also if you have rooftop solar. And the reason for that is because when you're producing power and it's flowing into the grid, and there's a line worker up on the lines that needs to fix it, they think all the power's been shut off because it has, but you're still producing into the grid, and trickling some energy in there can injure that person. So from a safety standpoint, there's an automatic shutoff. If you have a battery, it acts like a backup generator. Your power will automatically switch to your battery and then generate your home until the grid comes back on. So that's battery, kind of what they look like. So they act as a backup generator if there's a power outage. It allows utilization of your overproduction, so you're not selling it back to the grid. And it has the potential to kind of in the big picture, if you zoom out, to kind of improve the resiliency of the grid with scaled up adoption, right? So we have energy generation and storage all over the place instead of just in one central location. However, they are not cheap. The batteries are somewhere in the range of $10,000, and they definitely increase the overall cost and the payback time for the system. So some people are getting batteries now, especially with DTE's changes. Some people are not. And it's just a very individual situation. Somewhat depends on whether you need a generator as well. That figures into the calculation. I live in a place where we don't lose power very often because the lines are buried. And so it's a different financial calculation. One of the questions that I was asked prior to this that I'll make sure I get here answered is that someone asked if you can get a battery later if you get solar now. And the answer is yes. Just make sure that when you talk to an installer, that they know that that's something that you're thinking about doing in the future, because you have to get an inverter that is battery ready, so you can add to it in the future. So what we know about distributed generation, what we know about rooftop solar, is this is not a technology that's accessible to all people. It's not accessible to renters, to folks with no capital or credit, or to folks with deep shading in their roofs, or their roof is just like a whole bunch of crazy shapes and there's no big flat surface. So it's why we also need a clean grid and we need community solar. However, there is a strong argument for lots of on-site solar, as much as we can do. There's the climate argument, because we can do it now, right now. It's something that we can start doing. There's the efficiency argument. There's no loss from long time of travel for distribution. You're not generating electricity somewhere far away and losing it slowly as it goes to where it's, you can't get any closer than your roof. There's the resiliency argument, which I talked about in terms of pairing with battery storage and acting as a backup generator. And over time and in the future, hopefully with legislative changes, we're looking at a decentralized grid. And then there's a financial argument. Now there is the return on investment is somewhere between 9 and 13 years, usually close to 10-ish. And then after that time, you've paid off your system, and it's just creating income for the homeowner, because now you have lower electricity bills, you've paid off your system, and it's all gravy after that. So there's actually a financial argument for it. So again, if you're interested in the Solarize program, and learning more about it, participating in it, coming to a meeting, helping to host a group, then you would just contact me. The program's been wildly successful in its first year. We've gotten over 850 kilowatts of new clean energy in the Ann Arbor area. People in townships and other areas of Washtenaw County are welcome to participate as well. This has been on 129 roofs. To give you some perspective, a normal year in Ann Arbor might see 30 permits for solar pulled. And the 129 roofs is not just, that's just what we did in the program. So there were certainly people going solar outside of Solarize as well. So there is momentum here, and it's really exciting. And again, it's something we can do now. Okay, breath. Now we're going to talk about electrification. So we talked about our grid and our electricity and needing to make our electricity clean, right? But there's another whole topic about our homes, and that is the direct emissions that our homes are creating. Not the emissions from our electricity, but the fossil fuel combustion that we're doing inside our buildings. And if you look at Michigan as a state, all our buildings, residential, commercial, industrial, direct fossil fuel combustion in the building, mostly natural gas, accounts for approximately 20% of Michigan's emissions. Not all regions do this, right? We heat with gas. In the Southwest, they're heating with electricity. This is a regional thing. But we have gas furnaces, we have gas stoves, we have gas water heaters, and we have gas dryers. And these direct, so natural gas, and go back a minute, natural gas, from leaks everywhere, right? At production, it leaks. That you've heard of fracking, right? And you know that fracking releases natural gas, and that creates methane into the environment. And methane is magnitudes of order worse than carbon in terms of a global warming effect. So we're leaking at production, we're leaking at processing and storage, at transmission, at distribution, and that big blue circle at the end is we're leaking at the building level in our homes. And this is not good. This is not good. We talked about outdoor air quality at the beginning. So here's a fun fact for you. Nobody regulates indoor air quality in our homes, right? Have you ever had anybody, other than radon in your basement when you move in, pretty much indoor air quality is unregulated. And we spend up to 90% of our time indoors. The EPA says that indoor pollutant levels may be 2 to 5 and as much as 100 times higher indoors than outdoors. And we know that homes with gas stoves have between 50 to 400% higher nitrogen dioxide emissions than homes with electric stoves. Just let that sink in for a minute. I mean, it's enormous. And venting matters. Having a hood that vents properly to the outdoors does matter. Unfortunately, not everybody uses, in fact, the vast majority of people that even have proper venting of a gas stove don't use the vent properly or enough every single time you turn on the stove. There's not very good regulation and enforcement of codes in that area. So there are lots of gas stoves that aren't vented at all, some that are vented improperly. And so it's kind of a mess. Also, we know that the nitrogen dioxide effects, the indoor air quality effects in children is not good. So in 2016, the EPA found a causal relationship between exposure to nitrogen dioxide and respiratory health effects in children like asthma. But also besides asthma, there's IQ and learning deficits. You can have cardiovascular changes, increased susceptibility to allergens. And we know that there's a massive increase in respiratory asthma diseases in children, right? We know that people with lower income and people of color often face higher exposure because their outdoor air quality is also worse. And we know that residents that are living in counties with higher levels of long-term nitrogen dioxide were more likely to die of COVID-19. So, just about everything affects the same people over and over and over again, the same frontline people, the same lower income folks and folks in marginalized communities, people of color. So what do we do? Well, we electrify. We clean up our grid. We produce our own power wherever we can find space to do so. And we start transitioning away from these fossil fuel burning appliances. This sounds totally overwhelming. I get it. But it doesn't all have to be done like right now, all at once. The best thing you can start to do is think about it. Because at some point you're going to be in a situation where it's time to replace something. Your stove, you're remodeling your kitchen, your hot water heater, breaks, dies, needs to be replaced. And if you've done a little bit of investigation ahead of time, when your hot water heater goes out, you don't want to scramble around trying to do a whole bunch of research and getting contractors and finding out information while you're taking cold showers for the next several weeks trying to sort it out. But if you've done your research and you know what's available and what you think you're going to want when it's time to make that change, then you're in a better situation. So stoves are the first one, I think, that people might want to think about because of that indoor air quality issue. We just did this. We just replaced our gas stove with an induction range. And my husband is the cook, so I can't tell you from personal experience, but he is in heaven. He loves it. It boils water in like freaking 30 seconds or 60 seconds or something like that. It's very sensitive to temperature changes. You can simmer forever. It's easy to clean. He's just very, very happy. And he was a skeptic. There are, I think I'm gonna, yep. This is a heat pump. So when we think about furnaces, that's the biggest issue, right? That's like, that sounds really big and really scary. There are two ways to heat your home with electricity. One is geothermal, which many people have heard of, and one is an air source heat pump. So that's a ground source heat pump is geothermal, and an air source heat pump is what you see here. Air source heat pump is much less expensive upfront. Geothermal is quite an ambitious project to put in because you have to bore these giant holes in the ground, and might be a better application for either new construction or large applications, industrial buildings. But an air source heat pump is different. It's not resistance heating, right? Where you plug in a space heater and it generates energy by resistance or heat. That uses an awful lot of electricity to heat up a space. But a heat pump actually pulls heat out of the exterior air and brings it into your house. And the technology has improved enough that these can work in cold climates like ours, called cold climate heat pumps. And believe it or not, in the winter, even in very, very cold conditions, there is warmth in the air and somehow the heat pump finds it and pulls it into your home. The way a heat pump works is it just works in reverse as your air conditioner. So when it's time to cool your home, it just works in reverse. It pulls the heat out of your home and deposits it outdoors. It's extremely efficient. It uses much, much less electricity than a resistance heating, like a space heater. It's more efficient than a gas furnace or a boiler. There is a learning curve in terms of using them and getting used to them and understanding how they work. They work better if you're maintaining a certain level of heat as opposed to what we think of now. When we go to bed, we turn it down. When we get up, we turn it back up. You know, we're thoughtful about constantly changing the temperature in our homes to reduce how much we're using, and heat pumps work better at a more sort of even generation of heat. There also are some issues as it gets super, super cold. They have a backup resistance heat capacity so that when it gets too cold for the heat pump to pull actual heat out of the air, it can switch to resistance heat. Okay, last section, I promise. I'm talking so much, but there'll be time for questions, I promise. So we've now talked about clean energy and producing our own energy, renewable energy. And we've talked about then electrifying, right? Now, nobody that I know, including all of the staff I work with, probably even Josh, probably even me, would go enthusiastically to a lecture about energy efficiency because it just sounds really, really boring. But if you don't talk about energy efficiency in the big picture, you're missing one leg of this three-legged stool, right? This trifecta of what we have to do. as we electrify everything, the demand on our grid is going to get very, very high. And we're going to need even more energy, right? We need more and more energy if we're electrifying things, both on site and centralized on the grid. We know that the least problematic energy for our environment is the energy we do not ever use, right? There are several low-hanging fruit things. There are big things we can do in terms of building ceiling, but there are also very low-hanging fruit things that can have a huge bang for their buck that you should be thinking about if you haven't yet, as you're looking at the big picture of this. One of them is stop heating outdoors. Stop letting your air conditioning cool the outdoors. On the left here, this is called a blower door test. And it's kind of a fancy way to figure out how much your building is leaking and where. And it's not that expensive to do. In fact, you can get something. This is what I'm planning on doing post-COVID, once I can let people back to my house again and feel safe, is to get what's called an energy audit. There are companies that will do energy audits. They will come in for not that much money and do a blower door test and, do an assessment of your whole home and tell you where you can get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of trying to cut your energy. So on the right here are pictures of leakage at the tops of walls and attic access where you might be leaking warmth or cool. Our very cool Ann Arbor District Library, which hopefully you all use regularly, besides lending out books, also lends out tools. And one of them is called a thermal camera. So you can sign up and actually request a thermal camera and go around your house and figure out, if you can't tell just by the ambient air, where you might be leaking. This is attic insulation. An effective attic will have somewhere between 12 to 18 inches of insulation. If your insulation is less than 6 inches deep, if you can see the ceiling joists, you just need some more insulation. Insulation is a thing that, depending on the age of your home, might be, it can be really, really significant way to reduce how much energy that you're using. And it could be that you have great insulation in some parts of your home and really poor insulation in other parts. And it's definitely worth looking into. LED lights, I mean, no brainer, right? This is a no brainer. Every time your light bulb needs to be changed, put an LED in. It costs more, it lasts freaking forever, and it is so much more efficient and uses so much less energy. They make them now in all kinds of colors. So they used to only be like a very bright, cold light, and now they make them in warm colors that look more like incandescence. You can't even tell the difference. So if you haven't yet started doing this, this would be the, probably the number one thing I would suggest. And then I imagine many of you have seen that Energy Star label on things, that blue square, right? That Energy Star label is not just a marketing tool, it's pretty real. Appliance manufacturers have worked really hard to reduce how much energy their appliances use in order to get that Energy Star certification. It's meaningful. So if you're looking to replace your refrigerator, you have to buy a new microwave, computer, look for those appliances that have that Energy Star rating, and they can definitely pay for themselves over time also in terms of the energy savings that you're getting from those appliances. So again, totally overwhelming, right? So nobody's telling you to go do all this right now, take out a second mortgage and decide not to send your children to college because you have to just gut your entire house and fix everything. No, that's not what anybody's saying. It is simply about making the right decisions along the way as you go, right? Solar pays for itself over time, not right away. But if you have time, it pays for itself. If you have credit or capital that you can invest in your solar system, it will pay itself off over approximately 10 years or so, and then it will start paying you back. So there's that financial kind of calculation you have to do for yourself. We know that electricity, this is something you should be aware of, electricity from DTE is more expensive than gas by quite a bit. So when we electrify and get off of natural gas, it's going to cost us more to run these appliances, even though they're much more efficient than our gas appliances. This isn't true everywhere. It's definitely true in Michigan, and it really has to do with the cost of gas and electricity. This is another thing that policy could change, right? In terms of subsidies and how we're currently subsidizing electricity or coal, fossil fuels. So when you pair that electrification with solar, generating some of your own energy, and deep efficiency work, so you're using less, that helps to offset that increased cost of running the new electric appliance. So it's kind of thinking about it in the big picture, right? And thinking about sort of your map, your energy map, your roadmap of like, okay, here's where I am now. Here's what's ideal. Here's an entirely electrified, clean energy home. And then taking the small steps along the way that will help move you towards that. When we talk about the finances of all of this, we never discuss what's called the social cost of carbon. And that is the cost of not doing this, right? That's the cost of continuing as we are as a society burning fossil fuels. You saw the number of people that are dying currently from burning fossil fuels. And we know that global warming is costing a fortune. We know the wildfires and the floods and the tornadoes, all of this has a financial cost as well as obviously a human cost. And so when we do our kind of personal calculations around this, that's another thing to keep in mind, even though you're not calculating that on your budget, you know, you have your own budget internally, it is something to consider in terms of when we zoom out and look at the big picture of the cost of what it's going to take to move off fossil fuels is big. The cost of what it would take if we don't move off fossil fuels is bigger. If that makes sense. Ta-da! I did it. And I did it in under an hour. I'm so proud. You should note that this is my email address. It is a Gmail. I have a Gov email coming, but I haven't figured out how to use it. So just go with this one. It's juliekroth111@gmail.com. You can also find me and that email address at a2gov.org/solar. That's where you can learn about the Solarize program. And you can also get my contact information if you can't quickly write that down or screenshot it. Now I'm going to stop sharing and oh my gosh, drink a little bit of water. So we're going to open for questions. As I mentioned before, this is a city city Zoom account where we cannot have a chat function for Open Meetings Act reasons. So what we're going to have to do is raise hands. And there are two ways on Zoom accounts to do this, depending on what kind of Zoom account you have. So at the bottom of your screen, most of you will see a little thing that says reactions. And you can like make a heart. Yep, someone's got their thumb up. You can like have a party and all of those things will go away, the reactions. But under it says raise hand. That doesn't go away. So if you want to raise your hand, you can raise your hand and then you'd have to click it again to lower it. If you don't have that button on your Zoom account, then you would go to where it says participants and click on that. And either at the bottom of the list, you'll see an option to raise your hand, or sometimes a person will have it, they will hover over their own name and they will have a raise hand option there. And then if all else fails, just come off mute and like say, hey, I got a question because I can't raise my hand. So, all right. So I will just start opening to questions. I'll start calling on the people that I see with their raised hands here. I'll try to do it in some sort of order. Clifford Johnson, go to it.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, great. Yes. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. So we're really gung-ho. We want to move on this right away. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more. I'm very interested in the battery option. And I've heard just anecdotally that you have to lower your expectations about, like, in an outage, how much power. Okay, could you say more about that? I'll mute myself.
Yeah, excellent question. Really good question. That's a great point. So, when we're talking about the solar systems, we're talking about what I said was grid tied systems, right? Some people wonder about going off grid entirely, right? Can I just go off grid? Just never mind the grid. I want to power my own house and store everything in the batteries. Well, you better have a pretty tiny house, very efficient house, and a lot of battery storage, because the winters are long and dark, and it's hard to get enough battery storage to power your entire house at full function. So when you think about having a backup battery, you want to think about it the way you'd use a generator. So if you're in a storm and you know your generator has propane in it and you've got a certain amount of, hours that it's going to last you, what are you going to power? You're going to power your refrigerator, right? You're going to probably, if it's like super hot out, you're probably going to want to do some air conditioning in the middle, like 3 o'clock in the afternoon for a couple of hours. You're going to be thoughtful about what you're probably not going to charge your electric vehicle if you don't have to at that exact moment that the power's out. So you're right. And you can talk to, when you're getting a battery, talk to the installer about how much energy you want to have in a backup situation for how long. And you can get more than one battery, depending on what your needs are. Also keeping in mind that the next day it's going to recharge again. Most likely, if there's sun. That won't happen if it's a deep, dark, cloudy day. You're not going to charge it. So what is your expectation? How many days do you want to be able to go at low level? You look at the weather forecast. Oh, tomorrow's a sunny day. So it's a little bit like that. Yeah, great question. Sally.
I wanted to ask a question about how do you get a community meeting going?
Oh, for Solarize, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, you call me.
Okay.
So essentially, there's 2 ways to participate in the group buys for Solarize. One is to host and one is to join.
Mhm.
So if you're interested in trying to host a group buy, then what the benefit of that is that you get to, first of all, get competitive bids from participating installers that are part of the program. There's 12 of them. And then you choose your installer. And you get to choose the installer because you're the host of the group. And you choose the installer based on whatever you want to choose an installer based on, right? Some people choose it just because of the lowest price. Some folks choose because they really like the warranty and service, or they really like the longevity of the business, how long they've been around, or they really like the guy's tie. I don't know why people choose who they choose, but they choose their installer based on what they choose their installer. And then what the host does is basically emails, calls, posts on social media, to their next door, calls their colleagues, talks to their neighbors. We have yard signs, we have flyers, and invites everybody they know to come to a Zoom meeting. And I help, right? I help with language, I help with flyers. I also help when other people are contacting me directly saying, I don't want to host, I just want to come to a meeting. Like, I'm good with Sally picking out an installer and I just want to come join a group buy that someone else is hosting. So you can either join one or you can host one. And if you're in one, if you join one, there's no obligation to do anything. So you can be part of the group. You can get an estimate from that installer. You can get outside estimates from other installers to compare, we're keeping prices down. And you can choose to either go in the group or not go in the group. It's not high pressure sales. It is just opportunity and education, and as fun as we can make it in Zoom world. And someday, I promise it will be in person and we'll have snacks. Does that answer your question, Sally?
And do I call you on your website?
Yeah, my email is the best way to do it. So it's that Gmail account. So again, if you go to a2gov.org/solar, you will find my email, and you will email me and we'll talk.
Okay, great.
about how you
Thank
wanna
you.
engage. Sure, yeah. Lauren, I see you.
Hi, I have actually two questions. Can we do a Solarize meeting if we're not in Ann Arbor City? I'm in Scioto Township. That still work?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we've done several in townships. We love the townships, and we tend to invite people into, you know, when we first envisioned the program, I envisioned it as being very geographically compact. So it would be this little neighborhood or that township, and as it turns out, the installers think that Washtenaw County is a geographically compact neighborhood because they're used to driving, like I said, all over the state to do these things. And so the townships, and we invite Ann Arbor folks into it, we invite IPSI folks into it. So yes, you can host in your township for sure.
Okay, fantastic. And my other question is, our neighborhood has a lot of interest in solar, but our homeowners association is kind of a stick in the mud. Do you have any advice for people who are dealing with that situation?
I do. I'm so glad you brought that up. I can't tell you how many HOAs I've talked to now. I have talked to boards, I've talked to communities. We now have done Solarize groups in homeowners association neighborhoods or condo association neighborhoods. And we've had ambassadors like yourself that have a lot of interest that have moved the needle and made it happen. And basically it requires a cooperative board. But sometimes boards are nervous because they don't, of all the things they don't know. So I've gone and talked to communities about solar. I go and talk to HOA boards and answer questions. And I am very enthusiastic about HOA and condo association neighborhoods, in part because they tend to be pretty cohesive. And I love neighborhoods that are cohesive and they already have kind of a good connection with each other. And this is a way to grow that. Also because it's really easy to put up solar when you've just got a whole bunch of homes that are all the same or so relatively the same. So I am very happy to meet with and talk to communities and boards of people who are interested. And we have examples of folks who have moved their board to accepting it. We have language that they've used in terms of contractual language that the boards have established. So we have examples of that. So yes. Dennis.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Oh yeah, sure, Lauren. Yeah. Dennis.
Okay, so I was just going to ask a question: is anybody doing anything with Tesla solar roof or Tesla power walls currently? And if they are, how do you find out who's doing it? We have kind of an odd situation. We've gone to fully electric cars. We have lots of roof space on our small lot because we have 3 buildings on it. And we're looking to convert to as much renewable as we can.
That's fantastic. Yeah, the short answer is no. Tesla's not working here in Michigan. Their batteries are accessible here. There are installers that are installing Tesla batteries here in Michigan and Ann Arbor.
Not the actual solar roof.
But not the solar roof. It's been a much slower than expected rollout. They've had more bumps in the road than they expected. They had lots of promises to deliver and then pulled back. People who spent $1,000 and then they say, oh, we're not going to be in your state. And it's not looking like it's moving any faster. They're also much more expensive in terms of just the, generating the same energy. But
okay, so not the solar roof, but they also offer solar panels now, right?
yeah, they're just not here. Tesla's not here yet. They're not working in Michigan. They don't have it here. So if they come here, great. We will welcome them with open arms.
Okay. What about a solar wind combination?
I don't know of any combinations. Wind energy in individual homes, like residential homes, has not taken off very much because it's a much better technology when you're out in a field or in a big open area that's flat that gets a lot of wind without obstruction, whereas residential neighborhoods aren't really like that. And so you don't see a lot of individual residential wind. Josh, do you have any comment about that?
Yeah, Julie, I think you nailed it on the head. Basically, you know, where we're at here in Ann Arbor, unfortunately doesn't have a very good wind profile for wind turbines. So usually you will see, you know, right along the lakes, for example, there are a lot of turbines that are put up. But yeah, unfortunately here in Ann Arbor, we just don't have the topographical and other features that would lend to that.
Some pretty cool things you can do with solar, though. I've seen people not just put solar on their roofs, but create a solar pergola for their yard, or solar awning to block sun that's baking in their west side of their house. So they need something over their window anyway. Solar carports, solar, all kinds of fun things you can do with solar panels if you get a creative installer, but haven't seen a lot of wind. So
Okay.
thanks,
Thanks.
Dennis. Okay, now I have somebody called LWYBORNY.
Okay, I'm muted. Thank you for your nice presentation. First question, you mentioned how the city has changed its requirements, you know, its taxing to not tax solar roofs. I'm wondering if the same things will be done about ground source heat pumps, because we put in a ground source heat pump for our house a number of years ago, and they increase our taxes. So that's the first question. So you can answer that.
I don't know. Josh, do you know?
No, I don't, but something definitely to look at, especially with
We
the.
can look into that. Now, having said that, my understanding is that the folks that already put up solar and had the property tax increase don't have recourse. It's not like they can go and reduce their property taxes that were already increased like 5 years ago. That is my understanding, but maybe you don't quote me on that, which means even if there was a change in the law around ground source heat pumps, you might be out of luck in terms of retroactively changing it. But now I'm just speaking out of very little knowledge. So I apologize. I can't answer that. But the right people to ask that question would be the city assessor's office.
Right. Yeah, I have little hope that they would decrease my taxes. And once they get money out of you, they don't want to give it back. So
right.
I understand that. The second one is Biden's supposed to be coming out with a proposal to create jobs, address climate change, and I suspect there's a chance that the subsidies or tax write-offs for solar might increase under this plan. So it makes sense that, we're not going to do anything right now anyways, middle of winter, but because you can't put in a solar program on your roof when there's snow on it. But I would think we want to wait and see what happens from that, and see if we get a bigger discount. That's just a comment. I did have a solar installer come out and look at a possible installation. And because we have the ground source heat pump, we have 2 meters, one for the ground source heat pump, which uses, quite a bit of electricity. And then we have a residential, and they say, well, DTE only allows for you offsetting the electrical demand for one of your meters, not both. Can you confirm that?
My understanding is that that is not my understanding. And you're getting to close to the limits of my knowledge, because this is a newer thing, but the installers I've talked to that have put in installs in folks with geothermal have done both the geothermal and the home on 2 different meters, or they combine the meter. And so I don't think that's true. You might want a second or third opinion about that. And as far as the federal tax credit, you could be right, but the fact that they just extended the 26% that was supposed to be sunsetting makes me think it might not be in this way. What I'm pushing for, and what I think a lot of folks are pushing for, actually is not necessarily an increase in the federal tax credit, although that'd be great, but more of a change to a rebate instead of an income tax credit, because then it could benefit folks that don't have income tax liability. So older retired folks and lower income folks. So if anything is to be done, I don't know. I don't really know anything, but my my pontificating guess is that maybe it would be something along those lines. And if it were to be done, This year, it would certainly be retroactive for anything, probably, I would hope, that was done this year. Oh, and to your last point, solar installers are working right now. As long as there isn't actively snow on your roof, they're putting in solar now, like currently, which is crazy, but that's what they do. But I
Right,
hear you.
yeah.
I absolutely hear you. Yep.
Right. Well, the point about the ground source heat pump, you're right. I do have two boxes, 2 meters. And so what the guy was saying is you'd only put in one solar array that could either be the residential or the ground source heat pump, but not, you can't have 2 arrays, because the problem is that if you've got 2 meters, then we're getting the power from the grid for the other one. If I'm making enough power for 1 meter and say, well, I want to offset the ground source heat pump, the problem is they're going to discount it 50%. So that goes to the grid. So I don't get, much of a credit, nearly much of a credit. So what I'd want to do is put in 2 solar arrays, one for each meter. And he's saying that I can't do that. That's the question I'd like to have answered.
So I think you should get 1 or 2 more estimates or opinions about that from installers, because that's not what I've heard. And this isn't, like you're at the top of my level of expertise, since I'm not an installer and I've only worked with a handful of people with geothermal. But my understanding is you can do 2 arrays. Don't quote me, but I would just say talk to a few more installers and get a couple more opinions about that. Be my recommendation.
I would just really quickly chime in and agree with Julie that I think that my understanding is also the same, which is that they usually have a cap as far as electrical requirements, so capacity on that side. But as far as the meters go, yeah, definitely get a second opinion on that as well.
It's like you could get 2 arrays for 2 meters.
Yeah. To me, it sounds a little strange, because usually, even with solar that's installed, this is also something really good to know. If you have solar installed, you can actually add to the system over time. And you might have to upgrade some of the electrical and all that, but that's something to know, is that you can continue to add to the system if there's space and capacity.
Yeah. So DTE will only approve a size system that covers the electricity that you're currently using. They won't oversize your system. But if you grow because you get an electric vehicle in 2 years and now you need more electricity, DTE, if you want to add on to your system at that point, then they'll permit that. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
The last question is about the roof. So my roof is maybe 25 years old.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a 50-year roof, but the question is, do I go ahead and redo the shingles now that we're putting the solar panels on the house? Or do we just, the solar panels are going to help cover the roof, might, make it last longer? Do you have any suggestions on that?
I do. And that's a great question. So most installers will say that you want to have at least 7 or so years left on your roof in order to put solar on and make it worth it. If you have less than that left on your roof, then you're just going to end up having to take the solar off and put it back on, which is a few $1,000s. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. That said, if your roof, what I would recommend is that you get a roofer out that you trust, who tells you the condition of your roof and how much time you have left on it. If you've got 10 or more years on it, then you can do it. If it's getting close to looking like it's probably at the end of its life, it's not a bad idea to replace your roof at the same time you're doing solar. And the reason for that is because that federal tax credit for solar, most tax advisors read the language in that law to say that it can apply to your roof if you're doing your roof at the same time as your solar, because it's considered site prep work for the solar. Some tax advisors are saying it's the portion of the roof that hosts the solar, and some of them are saying, no, I read this as it applies to your whole roof, because you're not going to do half your roof. So, listen to your tax advisor. But if you need to speed up, maybe you wouldn't replace your roof for another 3 years, but doing it now will give you that tax credit. It might be worth doing it all at the same time. So I would get a reputable roofer to just take a look. When I did my solar system, I didn't know how old my roof was, because I had moved in here and there was already a roof up. And they said I had plenty of room left on my shingles, but there were some damaged shingles. And so they just fixed the few areas that were damaged before we put solar on. So thank you for those.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. I think It was Dennis next, and then Meghana, and then Don, and then Wendy. Try to keep me to that. Or Dennis, did you already go? If you guys put your hands down after you
Yeah, I
that
already went, so
Okay.
it's okay. I'm done.
Thank you. Okay.
Sorry about that. I'll put my hand down. Sorry.
Your little hands down, and I can keep track. So maybe we're at Meghana. Let's go to Meghana.
Hello, I'm Meghana. I'm a reporter for the Michigan Daily, and I had a question specifically for Mr. McDonald, if that's okay.
Of course.
All right, perfect. So I know you're the energy coordinator for the city of Ann Arbor. I was wondering if you could give me a little bit more information about what that title entails, and also if you had anything to say in addition to what Ms. Roth has said so far.
Yeah, so I'm energy coordinator for the city. I've been working in my current position for about 5 years, mostly helping out on community-wide projects as well as municipal operations. We kind of started off the original Power Hours, I guess, the Solarize Power Hours, about a year, maybe 2 years ago now. Had a few of those events, and they've kind of morphed into these Solarize events, which have been really successful. Julie's been leading them and doing a great job with them. So it's a little bit of the background on myself.
Thanks, Meghana. And Don.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, great.
Good. Hey, I had a question about, you mentioned that if things were shaded, there would be an issue. Obviously, if it's in the shade, solar panels aren't going to work. What if it's partially shaded? I've got a house that is shaded part of the day. I'll say, I don't know, half of the day. The rest of the time it's not. And I don't think there's not really an opportunity to take the trees down. We don't necessarily want to do that.
Right.
But how well do these systems work in that case?
It's a great question. It's very individual. So, you can go to, I forget what it's called, Google Sunroof or Google Google Sunroof, I think it's called, something like that.
Okay.
And you can actually, it's software, you can see your roof and your house. And you can see based on how bright yellow or orange or dark green it is, how much sun you're actually getting on your roof. And in fact, the installers are using a sort of a more advanced version of that software when they're looking at your roof. And it's very individual. So it'll tell you, this is how much sun you get. This is sort of how long it would take to pay off your system based on, that kind of sun. Now, if you have a small area of your roof that gets good sun, for example, and then a portion of your roof that doesn't, you can choose to get higher efficiency panels. So if you have a small roof to work with or a small portion of your roof, the higher efficiency panels are more expensive upfront, but they are more efficient. So they convert the same amount of energy in a smaller space. So there are panel choices that you could make. There's also the possibility for some folks to use like a garage roof that works to, like I said, create some other space like a pergola. Some people have enough backyard space. It's not shady to do a small ground mount in their backyard. And some people just don't. It's just not going to work for you until the old tree, the giant oak that you love and cannot part with, just meets its end of life. So it's a very individual situation and probably requires you can take a look at that Google site, but then also that's when you want to get a few estimates from installers and find out what it really means in your particular situation. It's a great question.
Okay, and the installers do you have information on who to contact?
Yeah. So if you wanted to participate in a Solarize group, we have a list of installers that participate in these group buys. But
Okay.
if you're just looking for an installer, we recommend that you go to Michigan. I don't know if you're familiar with Michigan Saves. Michigan Saves functions as a green bank. It's a fantastic resource that we have here in Michigan that all of you should know about. Michigan Saves functions as a green bank. it connects people with low interest loans for energy efficiency upgrades, and that includes solar. And they have a loan loss reserve, so they can provide credit to people who wouldn't necessarily always qualify for credit because of lower income or poor credit scores. And they keep a list of contractors and installers for all kinds of energy work, installation or energy audits or solar. I would recommend that you go to Michigan Saves and look at their list of contractors in solar installers. That is who we use at the city. We rely on Michigan Saves vetting process. We don't vet above and beyond what Michigan Saves does. So if Michigan Saves has vetted you and has you on their contractor list and knows that you are, your licensure and insurance and all of that is up to date, then we invite you to participate in the program. So that would be where I would start. Wendy.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, sure, you're welcome. And I see people slowly dropping off, which is perfectly fine. It's 8:20. Go, if you need to go, don't feel like you're sneaking away. I appreciate every single person that has come here, but I'm here I've got more time. I can answer more questions. And as a reminder, this is being recorded, so it will also be available, hopefully linked on the website, and I'll be sending out a link to everybody who is here. So I appreciate all of you. But Wendy, please.
Thank you. I just had a quick question that I've wondered about for a while. Snow removal on solar panels. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I generally recommend not doing it because I think it's terrifying, like crawling around and trying to get snow off panels. What most people will tell you is that, first of all, your panels are not producing nearly as much in the winter as they are in the summer. So when you're looking at what solar produces, you're really looking at an annual picture of how much your solar will produce. And the solar that you're producing on a gray winter day is small compared to like a dramatically different than July. So when you have snow on your roof, you are having zero production. If you have a snow-covered panel, it's not producing anything, but it's producing nothing in a month that is already producing not very much. And snow actually lasts on our roofs way less time than you think. And if you look at the actual days that your roof is snow covered, it's not that much. And I can tell you from experience, snow slides off my solar panels. So it's slightly sometimes scary. So you can get, it's just they're slick and angled. And while I'll have snow sticking around on my shingles where I don't have solar panels, oftentimes the snow will just come sliding right off of my solar panels way before it comes off the rest of my roof. So my own bias is just leave it and accept that you're not making energy on the day or couple of days or handful of days you have snow on your roof. Some people get up there with tools and brush it off. There are some folks who use like a Rain-X or some other kind of thing that makes them even more slippery so that the snow is more likely to slide off. Those are options. I'm lazy and I choose the option of just waiting. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure, my pleasure. Are there other new questions? If anyone doesn't know how to raise their hand, you also can just jump off mute and say something. Oh, and Clifford is raising his hand again. Hi, Clifford.
Hi. Yeah. So this is sort of a follow-up from the one about like the installers. So normally, if we didn't have this program, anytime we have something this big done, a roof put on, we go through this whole careful vetting. You get at least 3 bids. You look at Angie's list, because you don't want to go for something that costs $10,000 and then regret it.
Right.
I'm planning to at least go to the meeting and maybe participate in the one on the 21st. So that's just,
great.
coming up. But I would be joining in an already existing group. So I know you've already said that you guys don't, and the city doesn't vet these. It's the state saves program.
Right.
Can you though, as the coordinator, say anything about in the lifetime of the Solarize group, has it all been smooth sailing? Is anybody saying, oh my God, what a horrible installer?
No, that's a really, really good question. And we strongly encourage, well, first of all, when I work with hosts, one of the things that I really encourage them to do is get a lot of quotes and do vetting and be able to speak to the group about, here's why I chose this installer. And it's something to start with. And then in any individual group, you will clearly have people that are going to get a estimate from that group and get some other estimates and do their own outside vetting. And then you have other people who are like, oh my gosh, this is a ton of work. And as you know, vetting it takes time. And I just really like the guy that I met in the meeting, and I really trust Joe. And I'm happy to do that. They're reputable. They have good, reviews on Yelp, and I'm good. And it's entirely a personal choice. Where you are on that spectrum. And we encourage you want to feel 100% comfortable with what you're doing. Oh, and to the question about, have we had any bad experiences? So far, we have not kicked anybody out of the program installer wise. Occasionally you'll have one or two people who are frustrated about something, but it's usually around customer service because the group is big. And so sometimes communication is slower than we wanted. So it's been a learning curve for us at how big to make our groups and not make them too big, and watch installer capacity. Our smaller installers should have smaller groups. So some of it's been a learning curve in that respect. That most of the complaints that have occurred have been around that issue, like not getting back quick enough, that kind of thing. But we haven't had any disasters, knock on wood yet. I've been really pleased with all the installers that we've worked with so far. So
great, thank you so much. And just one quick follow-up question. I think I heard you correctly. So what DTE is going to say is, you may build this much solar and no more, based on this profile we have of your previous use. Exactly. And then you can come and say in 2 years, well, I just bought a Nissan Leaf.
Right.
And so I want to put in more panels.
That's absolutely right. And in fact, if that's your plan and you're thinking about the future in terms of electrifying, when you plan your system, you want to talk to your installer about that.
Right.
Because you want to, if there is capacity on your roof, they need to know that so that the system is easily added to and they don't use up all the roof space, or they choose an inverter that is larger, that has capacity to add more panels. They have to change out your whole inverter because it's at maximum size, that kind of thing. So just make sure you're talking very clearly with the installer about your goals.
Okay, thank you. I'll mute again.
Okay, and B. Van Gass, I think I see.
Yeah, thank you so much for holding this session. So I was curious as if you had any information on what the dollar per watt installed is right now on a regional basis, and also what kind of installed capacity gets you a pretty good volume discount for a Solarize group style buy?
Yeah, excellent questions. So the average price per watt that is going on in Michigan is around $3. So you're looking at $3 per watt as an average, but there's a lot of variability. And the things that go into pricing that can change that price per watt are things like size of the system. So if you have a smaller system, it's going to be a higher price per watt, right? Because you still have your inverter, your wiring, your electrician, your install, all those fixed costs don't change. So if you have a bigger system, your price per watt is actually lower. That's probably one of the biggest variables. Then you have the issues like I was talking about earlier about high efficiency panels. They can be a little bit higher. You can have complicated installs, like you're installing your solar panels on a detached garage. You have to trench into your home, and then the wiring that can raise the price per watt. You can have a complicated roof and just a complicated setup. You can have obviously batteries are not included in the price per watt. That would be additional. So there is a lot of variability, but $3 is sort of like somewhere to start, like to wrap your mind around. And as far as the discounts, most 10 of the 12 installers that we're working with give discounts where if 3 or more households move forward, everybody gets 5% off their bid. If 7 or more households move forward, everyone gets 10% off their bid. And if 10 or more households move forward in a group, everyone gets 15% off the price of their bid. There are 2 installers that are larger installers that have already figured out how to kind of reduce a lot of their soft costs. They don't do a lot of advertising. They're really word of mouth at this point. And so they tend to come in a little bit lower. They didn't feel like they could do that bigger discount. And so they have a smaller top level. One of them is 5 and one of them is 10. And so when the host is getting bids, you know, from their various installers, that's one of the things that they're considering. But so far, we have not yet had a group, again, knock on wood, that hasn't met the top tier. The goal is always to try to get as many people in a group as we can to make sure that it's robust enough that we can get a volume discount that is really strong. Dennis, did you have another question for me? Your hand is still
Yeah, and I apologize if you've already answered this, but is there somewhere we can find out if there's groups that are currently getting together?
Absolutely. We're having 2 coming up. We have one on the 21st and again on the 28th, believe it or not. Usually I don't have them that close together. So there are groups and they're both still, you know, adding people. The 21st one is getting close to full and the 28th one is just starting. So if you would like to join a group by, you know, just email me afterwards and I will send you a sign up link. And
right.
some
I wanted to
cover will be similar to what we've covered today, but that's okay. You'll also get to meet the installer and get an estimate if you'd like.
So one other follow-up question. So in my case, we've gone fully electric on our cars. So we have 2 separate meters running now. I've got 4 charging stations for cars. You know anybody that's done that kind of complex installation already?
Yeah, there have been a lot of very complicated. We've had everything from, you know, people who it's absolutely simple. I've got a ranch, I've got this, and just put solar up, to people with geothermal and electric vehicles and multiple meters. And so again, as you're talking to your installer, you'll find that different installers have different levels of creativity and how to solve problems. And they'll get into the nitty-gritty with you, but there's almost always a solution.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
I don't see any other hands. If there's anyone else has a question, wants to pop off and just ask the question, they can. And if not, thank you for coming today. And thank you for being part of the community that is asking the right questions and trying to solve these problems and assuaging my anxiety about climate change, which is the entire reason I'm doing this whole thing anyway. And so you guys are like, thank you. Thank you for helping me with my anxiety. It's a lot better than medications. So thank you and have a great night. I appreciate all of you and bye-bye.
Hey, Julie, can I hang on for a second?
Of course you can.
Oh, thanks.